All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. This is going to be a very, very, very special episode. We are here on a Sunday morning. Thank you, everybody, for joining. And I've got a guest that I haven't talked to on the podcast, I think, in about a year. The last time you guys saw this person on the channel was the December 2023 Palantir Weekly Recap. We will be having a 2024 recap in a couple weeks as well. But this is someone who has been a vital and instrumental member of the community. He is one of the pillars of why this community even exists when it comes to Palantir, particularly because 3 years ago, a lot of us that were investing in the company didn't really know what the technology was. And we needed someone on the inside who was actually using the technology to explain to us, hey guys, no, this is actually some pretty amazing stuff. And this is how and why we should be thinking of it so seriously. And he did that 3 years ago. He's been making content ever since. And now we see Palantir is where it's at today. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Codestrap. Codestrap, welcome back to the channel.
What's up? How's it going?
It's going really well. We are happy to have you back because we haven't talked to you in a while. Palantir just got done with their first ever DevCon. So kind of AIPCon for developers. You were there. You actually 3 years ago said, hey, Palantir needs to develop a developers community. And 3 years later, we are here today. So it's exciting to talk to you and happy to get into it.
Yeah, man. I just want to know if we're going to do the year in review special too this year. We got to get those ugly Christmas sweaters back on.
Yes,
get the boys together. Yeah,
get the boys. Yes. So that'll come probably in a couple weeks, guys. Palantir Weekly,
cool.
Ugly Christmas sweater review with the sweaters. It was your idea last time, and we did it. So that was
it was fun, dude. It was fun. Let's see if we can get Vince on there with his newborn baby boy, his twin. Be cool.
So I think let's get started with this first question before we get into the nitty gritty of DevCon. As you mentioned, you want Vince on the show because he has a kid, because you actually care about Vince, because it's the community that we all care about each other and our lives. And we've all been following this one thing called Palantir. So let's get started kind of high level. You've been talking about Palantir for the past 3-4 years.
Yep.
Obviously, we've seen what has happened with the company in terms of how they've grown their brand presence. Alex Karp has become a legit celebrity. What are your current thoughts on the progression over the past 3 years on Palantir, the brand, the company, and then we'll get into everything else?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I'm really shocked by is the pace of innovation and like how quickly they're releasing new stuff, and the strategy execution. So like I kind of had a pretty decent idea of the strategy a couple years ago and like where they wanted to take it. I thought it would take a lot longer to kind of get where we're at in terms of the actual execution. So they're already got a pretty decent ecosystem built with their partners. They have done a pretty good job, with building the developer community to date. The higher level strategy, like regarding the technology and like really replatforming SaaS applications and building out things like ontology interfaces, et cetera, that's happening way faster than I thought. And like at DevCon, for example, they unveiled ontology as code, which is something I've been dreaming of for a couple years, ever since I kind of got to know what the ontology does and like how do you build apps in Foundry. I was like, oh man, if I could just codify my ontologies and then hydrate them on someone else's stack, and then have like a way for apps to interop on common ontology definitions, it's like the network effects of that would be huge.
Right.
So the strategy execution is really accelerated, and I feel like, and then on top of that, they've somehow managed to stay relatively low on the headcount side, right? So their revenue per employee is still pretty high. I think they're about 4,000 employees now.
Yeah.
But they've managed to then accelerate product, deliveries and the product roadmap, even though they're not growing headcount that much, which to me tells me they're investing a lot in DevOps, automation, in the things they need to more like rapidly crank out product with fewer people, the kind of things I used to build. And also that they're probably leveraging AI internally fairly heavily, which I do know they do. They have some restrictions on being able to access certain things internally, but the developers are smart enough to find ways around these things, I think. So I'm not gonna say any more of that, but I do know that they are leveraging AI heavily, their own products especially, to help them accelerate. And so I think if you just look at that headcount number, the pace of innovation, the pace of product release, and you're watching it and you're just going, man, if they can keep this up, like they could scale really, really fast with minimal impact, I think, to the bottom line, as they really look to leverage AI internally and like speed up their own product development processes. So yeah, they've just managed to execute really, really, really well, like exceptionally well, and a lot faster than I thought they would 2 years ago. I thought like by this point, this time, like we'd still be talking about them with like 15 commercial customers, or whatever it was back then. I mean, it was a small number, I really wanted to see them get to like, more than 1,000 commercial customers by 2025, but we're somewhere in the ballpark. And like I said, they're executing, they're accelerating. Very cool.
Has that been the most exciting thing for you since 3 years ago? Just their speed of execution?
No, I mean, the most exciting thing to happen was GPT-4 coming out and AIP coming to fruition. I mean, I think that for everyone's been, if you're in technology, dude, like that's been one of the biggest things to happen in 20 years. So I think that's been the thing that's most interesting to me. And like, what I really liked is how Sham wrapped his brain around the implications of like AI and what it could do for Foundry so fast. Like, pretty much see eye to eye with him on every little bit of that vision, and including like if you go back and watch my videos, look, the models are a commodity. They're all going to converge to the same relative place. The thing that's going to differentiate it is all of the tooling around the model graded in a specific business context, so it doesn't hallucinate an answer that's not relevant to what you're trying to decide or what you're trying to do. Like, Foundry done a bit of this in government, but I 2-3 years ago, Palantir was not what you would call machine learning, traditional data and analytics approaches. They weren't thinking they were.
Code connection is getting hit pretty bad.
Is it? Okay. Let me try connecting to this other one.
Yeah, we kind of missed like the last 30 seconds of what you said. Yeah, different Wi-Fi. Yeah, guys, we're going to change the Wi-Fi on Code's thing. That should hopefully get it a little bit better.
All right.
And then I think we should be good. Did Snowflake freeze Codestrap? They found
All right, what about now?
I think we're good. We're good.
Are we
we're
good?
Perfect.
All right, cool.
Yeah, so we ended off where you said GPT-4 kind of changed the world, and you agree with Sham on all of his thoughts.
Yeah. So like, I think the most interesting thing to me is how quickly Sham has implemented a strategy around AI for Palantir that is really closely aligned with all of the things that I felt, which was like, models are a commodity, right? Like that's not where the big, the big value delivery is going to take place. It's in all the things around the model. And like at my previous job, I had gotten early, like our company had gotten a preview of GPT-4. We had done some work and kind of like got our hands dirty on this. And so I'd learned a lot of early lessons. In fact, like this is really funny. Before GPT-4 was publicly released, I went to the last Foundry Con before it was AIP Con. And I was telling anyone at Palantir that would listen to me, like, hey, GPT-4 is going to freaking change the world. Like I've been using it for the last 6 months. You guys don't understand what's coming. Like you've got to incorporate this technology into every part of your platform. And I don't think anyone really believed me, like to a large degree, that it was going to be like that impactful. But as soon as they saw it and got access to it, they were able to pivot really quickly. And before then, I don't think Palantir either was like super bullish on AI as a company. I think they thought that like, yeah, traditional machine learning, data analytics, data integration, that's amazing, but we're not going all in on this idea there's going to be artificial general intelligence or there's going to be something that's going to replace these techniques. And I don't think we're there yet either, but like as soon as we had this new pivotal technology, the fact that they could pivot in 3 months, basically, I think it was like 3 or 4 months, and Sham basically laid out a mission that said, all right, stop what you're doing, whatever you're working on, stop doing it. The next conference is going to be AIPCon, and you're going to have AI at the center of this product, right? And they were able to do that in like 3-4 months. And it's because they had so much of the foundational tech like already there and ready to go. So I think that the fact that they had been like kind of working in some of the problem spaces they had been, the fact that the platform was so mature and well developed, AI was almost like this natural add-on. And even though they didn't know it was probably coming, like the fact that we had this new tool just bolted right into the platform at a really foundational layer. And so the development of AIP has been right where I think it should be, which is like, it's not about replacing humans. It's about human AI teaming. What are the workflows you can build in there with AI kind of at the center?
Right.
And that's things like, how do you build a workflow for, what we jokingly call accept or reject university, right? Like the model comes up with a proposal. Do you want to implement the proposal? Like Palantir put that together with AIP Automate in a month because it already had laid the foundations with the eventing workflows and the ontology to make that really, really easy to do. And the same thing with like the security layer that sits around the ontology, right? To be able to securely allow the model to access data in the ontology or documents, like that is a huge engineering lift for people who are trying to catch up and compete with them. Whereas for them, it was like, "Oop, yeah, we're good to go, man. Like we can drop this in almost immediately." So yeah, the most interesting and impressive part on the technology side has been like to watch Sean's strategy around AI like crystallize really, really fast. That vision play out exactly the way we kind of thought it would play out over the last couple of years. And you're seeing it now. Everyone's starting to agree, oh shit, we might have plateaued on where these LLMs are going to get. Like I was saying this about a year ago to anyone that would listen as well. Is like, I kind of think we're going to reach a natural plateau and this thing's going to level off. I don't think we're going to get the same outsized gains we saw between like GPT 3.5 and 4. That seems to be reflected in the data now. And so the real,
And that's because
value,
of a lack of data to train on. Is that the reason why it's harder?
I mean, most people would say that we're running out of data, or at least data that is, differentiated and finely tuned enough to make a material difference in how the model answers a question. And like you're seeing companies now, like literally paying human beings to generate new data, like come in and, write down how you do X, Y, or Z, right? And like build a curriculum for my model kind of a thing. But I also think there's just a fundamental limitation to the fuzziness of the current approach to where it's like, there are other architectures that might be more promising for reasoning and for more complex thought processes than, what is the most probable answer given to this question, or what is the most probable next token for this answer that's being generated. That's a really fuzzy way to kind of reason about problems. And you need a lot of computing horsepower like around that to make it work. And one of the other things I was skeptical of early on was like, I've seen another technology that was very compute intensive, way more expensive to run at scale. It's called blockchain. And it didn't take off a large degree because of that fucking very problem. Not that the technology isn't super useful and isn't very good. It's really hard to scale, right, in a cost-effective way. And yeah, we're seeing costs come down, but a lot of the cost savings we're seeing is because people are selling shit at a loss. It's like it's like they're making money off of that. The economics haven't necessarily changed that much. Now, we've got things like Etched AI and Grok, Chamath's company, that are approaching chip design for inference a little bit differently. And that, I think the economics of that looks really promising. But again, it was just like one of those things where, yeah, these things are great, but like they're kind of great in small doses, and they're great in a workflow in which you put a human in the loop and is grounded in the right information and in a secure way. And the only thing that actually checks all those boxes, in my opinion, is Foundry and AIP. And they were able to get there like almost overnight, which is pretty crazy.
So one more high-level question before we get into DevCon. What is your current view as a developer on chips versus software?
Yeah.
How do you see the evolving AI ecosystem developing from either people having more emphasis on the chips that make the GPUs or the use cases of the GPUs themselves?
I mean, we're still in a infrastructure build out, right? Like I was saying before, the economics of this whole thing don't even make sense yet. There isn't even enough supply to meet the demand, right? Like try to go run a production workload that actually has a lot of inference that takes place in the day. And you've got to start talking to people about rate limiting. You've got to start talking like, why am I getting throttled? Like you are going to pay a premium, and there isn't still enough supply. It's nowhere near the saturation level of say like serverless compute or containerized compute workloads. Like those are practically free and they're abundant and they're everywhere. Right. So like I think we got a long way to go before the infrastructure is actually fully built out, and we don't even know what that looks like yet. So like for example, with quantization and like model distillation and some of these techniques, maybe we're going to have models that are running more locally at inference time. Like maybe we don't need gigantic models to run inference if we've fine-tuned them to specific domains and we have a lot of them and they sort of act in an ensemble. Maybe there's some that can run on devices. That's stuff I'm working on right now, like for these workflows we call text to action workflows. And we're looking at like, how can we make that run on the device? Because like, if you've got 10,000 workers that need access to a workflow a model's proposing or a remediation plan, and you try to go run that through a centralized system, you might be paying more than it's worth, or you might not even have access to the compute you need. So anyway, on the infrastructure side, it may be more distributed than what we think of today. It might be that like a lot of these things run locally or within a local network. It also might be that we don't have the right chipsets in the stack now to power super cheap, super fast inference. Now, like NVIDIA is working on that problem. Supposedly their next generation of these chipsets for inference are going to be incredible. We have to see it to believe it. And I do know that other startups have been kind of working in that space too. So I think that like the infrastructure portion's got a ways to go, and we don't know the right model yet, if it's going to be more distributed in nature, if it's going to be, you know, traditional, it's consolidated in data centers for inference. And then on the training side, like I've been pretty skeptical for a while that like there's going to be a very large decrease in demand for training. And I could be wrong. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, but the problem is if you look at the incremental gains for each of these new models, what you're seeing is like the gains are starting to decrease, right? The relative gain from version A to version B to version C. From version A to B, it was an astronomical gain. From B to C, well, it's good. C to D, we don't know yet, but it looks like it's probably going to be even smaller. And so why would you continue to invest in building out massive data centers if we're going to just have a suite of models that are relatively the same capabilities? The real differentiator is in the engineering around them, how inference is done. For example, like that reasoning engine that OpenAI released, which was very similar to Palantir's reasoning engine in AIP, and it uses self-reflection to kind of think about how to solve a problem. Well, that's not a new model. That's just a new way the inference is performed and a new way that they enrich the context around the model. Okay, so like, and when you start seeing like OpenAI and other companies starting to lean on those things more heavily, it really is like a leading indicator that like the incremental gains aren't going to be that big. And so why would I as a startup or why would I as Microsoft say, yeah, let's go build another 40 billion in chips and this gigantic data center to get a model that's marginally better than the last one? Like, why would you do that? It makes no sense. So if the investment would come in the things around it, which would be like the reasoning engines and the infrastructure, the infrastructure layer that's going to make inference fast and cheap. Like that's where I think the investments will shift. Doesn't mean those chip companies aren't going to make tons of money. It just might not be the same chipsets that they're selling today. It's going to be, I think, largely more focused on how do you make inference faster, cheaper, and better than it is on training, for example.
Right.
Happy to be wrong there, though. But and again, we don't know, I guess, is also the answer. Like we don't really know yet if scaling is going to hold or what's going to happen. We really need to see this next sample that Microsoft is working on. But yeah, as of today, I'm very, very, very skeptical that we're going to continue to invest in bigger and bigger training runs.
Okay, so let's transition then into DevCon. This happened in mid-November. It was really cool. 2 days, 14 product launches, 150 builders. You were there. A bunch of people from Palantir were there. Sham was there. Yep. And yeah, what was the experience like? What do you think it's going to look like over the next 10 years? And is this one of the core instrumental things they need to do to get more devs onto Palantir?
So it was really cool. They had it in their Palo Alto offices, same place they host AIPCon. They kind of it felt like going back to school in a way. It's kind of weird. It's like we're all in like they set up the trough it was like a cafeteria. So it was like you go and you sit. It's like being in high school again. Got all your or college. It kind of felt like this college experience. But it was really, the vibe was awesome, and it was like a lot of the best developers on Foundry. Like Nicholas from Merck was there. He's one of the more senior people that I know that's been working on Foundry for years, and like his team built Foundry DevTools, which was like the first early orchestration tool on GitHub for Foundry. It like orchestrates Foundry APIs. So they got like the A team and all of the world's top talent to come in there. I also knew a lot of the people there who either were customers or had won the fellowship thing. So it was really cool. And then the way they organized it, it was like you would go and you'd sit for talks for like an hour or 2 hours. You'd watch talks from Onduril was awesome, by the way. I was like super stoked when that talk was given, because I was like, that's one of my favorite companies. Let's hope they go public soon. And the way that the engineer there was rethinking supply chain and like how to leverage AI at the center of those functions was really unique. Like where I work, I deal with a lot of supply chain offerings, right? Like they're all over the place. You name the company, like I've been exposed to it. This was really unique in the way he was thinking about the problem. And like, it's like what I've been trying to get companies to do, but there's a lot of friction when you're trying to change the way you operate and do things you've been doing for 10 years. Like there's a friend of mine, David, made this really funny joke. Look, man, there's people at these companies that would rather divorce their wife than give up their spreadsheet. There's just no way. It's just not happening. So it's like, it was really cool to see someone who's just unleashed to go like rethink how do you do supply chain and demand planning when you have AI, and you have this really powerful tool suite. And that was like one of my favorite talks. Was really inspirational to think about like the art of the possible if you were just unblocked by all of the barriers, so they had all these talks. It was great. And I got to see everyone from Palantir there. And then you would go upstairs and you would do like, basically you're working on your DevCon project. So we had teams of like 4 people basically with one Palantirian.
Almost like a hackathon kind of.
Yeah, it's a total hackathon. Yeah, total hackathon. And the only thing that kind of sucked is like you'd get so deep into hacking and then they want you to go downstairs and like watch another talk or like go eat lunch, and you're like, dude, I don't want to go eat lunch right now. Like we're like head down trying to build something. So that was like a little bit chaotic of like context switching between a talk and then the project you're working on. But we would go back upstairs, we'd like hack on our project, and then we were hacking at dinner and then after drinks, and then so like you're just building pretty much the whole time. I think we did like 10 or 11-hour days.
Wow.
Which I've never done at a conference like ever. It was like, oh my god, this was like as much work as if I was at work. So it was pretty interesting. But my team worked on this project where we were like doing workplace injury reporting. And this guy Andy on my team worked for a helicopter company, and he knew like all the OSHA regs and FAA regs and like all the things around like workplace injury reporting. So we like created this system where you could like record a injury report on your phone, go through like an interview, and then what would happen is there was a automation in the background in Foundry that would like in AIP that would transcribe the report. They would then like cross-reference all of the OSHA and FAA regs that could be affected. Because I guess like if you don't follow OSHA regulations, when someone like say you're a pilot getting off a helicopter and you slip and fall on the pad, right? There's all these regulations that govern that. Not the least of which is if like it turns out that pilot was on anxiety medication or something, or was taking medication. There's all these other things that you have to do to stay compliant with OSHA. So we ingested all these regulations, and then like based on what you report, it would pull back all the relevant steps you need to follow and the codes that are affected. And that really helps like regulatory compliance. So you don't get like dinged every time. Like OSHA can come in and do an audit and find out, oh, you didn't do X and you didn't do Y, and here's the fine you now owe. And like it's impossible to keep up with this stuff because the codes change a lot and there's just too many of them for like a human to know what's going on. And so like we took advantage of the whole semantic search layer in Foundry. It was super easy to ingest all the PDFs. Like we just went to the online sources and grabbed them all. We got our vector embeddings. We wrote like a custom search algorithm with it. It's combined like string matching with vector search, and then did a re-ranking at the end. We were able to put that together in like 6 hours, right? Like from front end React app that could record the thing to like, or it was probably, it wasn't 6, but it was like 10 or 11 hours. We did it in one day. And all the way down to like getting the report generated that says, like, here's all the regs affected. And we could even link back to the PDFs and like to the underlying regulation. So you could like go back through the source material. That's a really good example of like human AI teaming, right? It's like, it's not replacing AI, but it makes the job of like trying to sift through fucking mountains of documents and information and synthesizing summary reports and like getting humans to look at the exact things they need to do. Like that's a massive productivity boost. So I think there's like a generalized version of that runs on AIP where you can kind of like templatize a lot of these things and they can apply to like multiple domains.
Right.
But anyway, it was a lot of fun hacking with everyone. And this guy, Matt, who's from Palantir on my team, he was amazing. One thing that we don't have access to that they had access to there is the debugging logs. So like if you get an error in Foundry, you only get this like really kind of cryptic safe error, or like kind of, I don't know, it's most of the time it's nondescript. We don't have access to their elk stack. It's like where you can go in and like search through error traces, but we did have access to that. And so I could have this guy, Matt, sitting next to me. He's got his laptop out doing all the searches against the error traces in the elk stack. And then I'm sitting here like just correcting them as he finds it. Okay, I got it. Yeah, it was classic. But yeah.
Okay, so do you think this is one day going to be something where like 10,000 developers show up? I know we're far away.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think it's gonna be way more than 10,000, dude. That number is super low. There's thousands of Foundry devs worldwide now. I think that should be somewhere on the order of like 100,000 kind of number, at least on par with like what you see in bigger like adopted platforms, whether that's Databricks or Snowflake or AWS. I think Databricks is around 70,000 developers, if I'm not mistaken. I think Databricks publishes their certification stats on their site, so you can go look it up. At last I thought it was around 70,000. So yeah, I want to see something on the order of hundreds of thousands of devs worldwide that are certified at some layer in Foundry too. Doesn't mean they're always working in the software layer. Like, got to remember, Foundry's also got these non-technical layers in it, right? It's got things like Workshop, and you got things like Contour and Quiver, and all these other things that they offer. And now like Workflow Builder, and those are areas of the stack where like your non-technical people can be super productive. Pipeline Builder, which is like a visual transformation tool. So out of all those certifications, a portion will be developers, a portion will be kind of the citizen engineers. But I think it's really important, like as they go to build the community, that they understand there's this like symbiotic relationship between software engineer and citizen engineer, where like software engineer is like a force multiplier for the citizen engineer. And they need to like kind of get strategic about like what are the right ways to architect and design in Foundry so that your software engineers become these force multipliers for the citizen engineers. And that's, I think, that's also
a citizen engineer is someone who's like a layman's coder, kind of.
No. They're more like subject matter experts in a particular part of the business. So maybe they like understand particular ways your business runs, but they're not software engineers, but they could definitely design a killer solution to a problem in Excel, like whatever, like they just know, like they might have a little bit of like SQL or a little bit of Excel background, but they have a lot of expertise in how the business actually operates. Then when you sit them down in Foundry, it's like, oh, wow, I've got this amazing suite of tools to now build workflow applications across my systems of record, or transform data in the exact view I need to see it with Pipeline Builder, and it can operate across billions of rows now. I don't have to go bug IT for a month to go get this like giant data lake platform set up that I'm never going to use because it's delivered 3 years late. So like the citizen engineers are the most valuable part of your business, in my opinion. The software engineers, I hate to say it, guys, but like the marginal software engineer is going to have a hard time, I think, in the future. I think it's going to be more like kick-ass, really good software engineers enabling way more downstream citizen engineers, especially in a platform like Foundry, where you really should, if the value proposition of Foundry holds up, you should really actually need a lot less software engineers than you traditionally would have if you're working on AWS or GCP or Azure.
Can you speak to that?
Yeah.
Why? Because everyone's concerned about AI replacing jobs. Why would Foundry be a force multiplier so that we don't need more engineers?
Well, I mean, the obvious ones are like, okay, let's just take your front end layer of your applications, right? Like that's traditionally done in React. React does, I think it's something like 80% of web and mobile web applications, or some obscene number like that. And more often than not, what I see enterprises building in is React for their front end, or God forbid they're in Java doing something like I think it's they call it Java server pages or something. Not a Java guy, but like that's it. That whole role of like, okay, I've got 5 front end engineering teams. Maybe they're maintaining 15 applications that we have built to help our operations teams and our businesses understand their data more. That can all basically be replaced right now with Workshop. Like most of the use cases I see are so trivial that you really don't need, 100% engineers just building this thing. You come in, you can build probably 80 to 90% of every use case you'll ever see in an enterprise inside Workshop, which could be done by a citizen engineer. That does not need to be, it's a point and click interface that taps into your ontology. Now, the ontology design should be done by a software engineer, right? Like if you have a bunch of software engineers that build the ontology, which is not only the data model, but the functions and actions, the behaviors of your data. What's interesting is that you can then build way more use cases on a single ontology that represents your business. Like I could build 100 use cases on top of that in Workshop, and I don't need to go back to the software engineers. Like if they've designed the ontology correctly, there is a ton of use cases you may have never even envisioned that can now be built by your subject matter experts, because they have an accurate representation of the state of the business and how the business behaves, right? And that's why it's a force multipliers, because like everything north of the ontology, most of the time, you don't need software engineers for. You might have some marginal work around the edges, different functions that might be required that you can't do in Workshop yet, or Pipeline Builder, or whatever it is that they need to enable the workflow they want to build. But the vast majority of stuff you can do is available in Workshop. So when I think of north of the ontology in Foundry, I'm really thinking like that should be 90 to 95% work done by citizen engineers. That's the majority of people in your organization, right? think how much more work can get done. You hear the NHS talk about this all the time. Like the network effects generated by a good ontology are massive, because now the thing becomes way more valuable with every use case that's built on it, with every part of your business that connects to it. The value of that thing starts to go through the roof, right? Nothing, and that's why it's saying like there should be way less software engineers, and they should be utilized in a way in which they're really dedicated towards proper ontology design, automation, platform orchestration, and then everything that the business is actually using should be like the person who fucking works the problem builds the solution, right? Like that should be the way this works. And if the value proposition that I had in mind of why I thought Foundry would be so disruptive and Palantir would be so disruptive, that's it. It's because we need to solve this problem of like only a handful of people in the business know how to effectively build and use software. Like that doesn't scale. It actually leads to a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse, in my opinion. And like with the actual subject matter experts being able to build their own solutions, now that they have this ontology there that's super powerful, that's going to generate massive value. And really, like, I don't think we'll ever go back to the old way of kind of building it. So yeah, and there's also new things they built that they announced at DevCon that are going to even further multiply the value of your engineers. So like we're going to have the ability to build custom React widgets for Workshop. What that means is like in Workshop, you've got all these pre-built widgets that do stuff, whether it's like visualizing data on a map, or whether it's letting you visualize the history of the edits made to an ontology object or whatever. There's like dozens and dozens of these things. But up until now, the only people that could build new ones were Palantir. But now they're opening that up to React developers in your organization. So like if you want to implement a specific visualization library and have that abstracted and just work natively with the ontology, guess what? You can do it, right? If you need to build a custom workflow widget that works with your ERP system and your CRM, and people can just drop that in, guess what? You can do it, right? Like that is going to again, this is about generating network effects by consolidating these building blocks into the ontology and into suites like Workshop, so that the citizen engineers downstream can start using those to just rapidly assemble and build solutions to problems. So
yeah. It is pretty exciting, and I think that the progress you highlighted a couple of years ago in terms of these force multiplier effects that you want to see inside of Foundry, which weren't there at the time, it's starting to pop up, and that's becoming exciting. And so that leads me to the next question, which you mentioned some of the competitors. So I want to bring up this $200 super chat.
Whoa.
Nicholas, I will make sure Code and I definitely get a drink for this $200 next time I see him. Nick says, Codestrap has said that Snowflake, Databricks, and Palantir are not mutually exclusive, but there are thousands of companies exclusively using Snow or Databricks. What is your sense of the demand from these companies to also adopt Palantir for SuperCloud plus AI services? I guess kind of summing up the question, I mean, can Palantir beat Snowflakes and Databricks long-term in this?
Well, I mean, number one, I'd push back on the premise. I have yet to go to an organization at scale that doesn't have all those tools, like Snowflake and Databricks. Whatever. Dude, even at the startup I was at, we had Snowflake, we had Databricks. Dude, what was the other one? Grafana. Like we had everything. And I mean, Grafana is more a visualization layer, but like.
So these are not exclusive. These aren't exclusive to you.
I don't see them as mutually exclusive. I do see more companies adopting Snow for their data warehouse. It's easier to get up and running, but are crying about it now because they're like complaining about the cost, and that it's like when something is not delivering a ton of value on the other side, it starts to get scrutinized. So I would say like Snowflake seems to be way more predominant as the primary data warehouse, although like company Matt now, it's like we deal with Snowflake, but we also deal with Databricks. And the reason is that a lot of the people who do interesting modeling or like kind of one-off data engineering exercises, they're not like software engineers trying to build a data warehouse or lake house that's accessible to the organization and all the company's data is in there. No, they're like really good analysts who have like a master's, and what they're trying to do is analyze the data in particular, build a model around it, and build a report, like a one-time analysis. And they'd much rather work in Databricks to do that than in Snowflake, for example. So like I would just push back on the premise a little. Like I don't see that as mutually exclusive. Maybe in the context of like, what's the data warehouse for the company built on? I can see that being like mutually exclusive. But like, in terms of them using the tool, no, because I see a ton of data practitioners who are, data scientists or analysts that prefer to work in Databricks outside of Snowflake for just the purposes of like one-time analysis or building a model that's interesting to help the company solve a particular problem around, engagement or whatever. Can you pull back up the question? I didn't get the last part there.
Yeah, which is what is your sense of the demand from these companies to also adopt Palantir if they're using Snowflake Databricks?
Well, I mean, we see it now, right? So like every company that has Palantir, I guarantee you has Snowflake and probably Databricks too. Like, so we don't have to speculate on that. They're absolutely doing it. The reason that they do it is because Foundry allows you to build workflows across systems of record in a way that you just can't do with those other tools, right? Currently, the way those tools are set up, it's actually very hard to orchestrate a workflow across, say, multiple systems of record where mutation is involved. And so like, yeah, you could read across those systems because you can bring them into the warehouse and look at them. And yeah, you can maybe write back in a transactional manner to the warehouse, but good luck trying to orchestrate like a saga that's going to flow across your ERP or CRM or maybe something you're using in finance that's actually capable of like rolling back a transaction if it fucks up, right? Like you got to build an orchestrator for that. Like, and good luck actually running an app on top of it, right? So like, again, this gets back to everything north of the ontology that's in Foundry. You don't have AIP logic, which is like a workflow builder that lets you assemble an algorithm basically visually, right? And like that doesn't exist in these other tools right now. You don't have Workshop to dynamically build an application to let you use that workflow you've now put together either in AIP logic or in a functions or in compute modules. There doesn't even exist such a thing typically to run. I mean, maybe in Databricks more like arbitrary compute workloads and in any programming language you choose. Like Foundry's got its own container engine now. So I think there's like, and the reason that's more attractive than using Amazon is because everything is integrated natively into the ontology and there's no infrastructure as code to write. So like normally that integration in the ontology layer is much, much harder to program around. An equivalent would be like, I have a bunch of domain services that are all set up either as microservices or a distributed monolith. And those domain services allow me to access different parts of my business data. Like what is your ontology, right? Like my customer's object, my person's object, my purchase order action, whatever. Normally that's exposed through what we call a service mesh, but there's fun things you got to program around. It's like distributed locks, right? That's one. That's not fun at all because if you don't do that, you're going to fuck up your data because what you're going to do is you start processing the same transaction twice or processing the same transaction at the same time twice. I don't want to program around that. Foundry takes care of that problem for you on your behalf. Dirty reads takes care of that problem on your behalf. So like the ontology, being able to just load in and build applications directly on top of it solves a lot of the system orchestration problems at the lower level that we typically have to deal with. Right. And so if I'm company A, I would much rather say, oh, great, we don't have to deal with that stuff ever again. All we have to focus on is the business logic of the application. Yes, sign me up for that. It takes companies a really long time to wrap their brain around that, you know, and I think it's if you're starting at zero in Foundry to get to the point where I'm at, where I could explain those things, it's going to take 2-3 years before you actually understand all of the benefits of doing that. So like, I think we're at this point right now where I think companies need a lot more education and practice and reps on top of Foundry to really understand all of those benefits. And you may see some bad design decisions in the interim as companies are like building out their apps on top of Databricks or Snowflake and other RDS systems. Because typically when you're building apps on those systems, you're still linking in like RDS or document databases or geospatial databases. They might make some bad decisions there and not know that like, oh, if I just had done this on Foundry, like the ontology is going to take care of all the hard parts. It provides all of those databases in one abstraction layer. Like it gives me the ability to leverage actions so that like if I want to perform common mutations, I get that plus the UI that goes with it. Like it's just going to take a couple of years, I think, for people now that the people who have it to really master it and then be able to like make good design decisions and understand where does Snowflake fit in this versus where does Databricks. And just to kind of dovetail on that, there is a place for those things in this new stack. So like a good example is the fact that virtual tables are now working off, it hasn't been released yet. It's in like a private beta, but like basically they're working off open data formats that can push compute down to the compute engine. So like if I want to use Snowflake to back all of my data in Foundry, I can actually push down all of the compute operations to the Snowflake layer and let it run there. Like if I want to group by, aggregate, filter, all the shit can be pushed down to Snowflake. And the resulting tables that are produced in there are then backing like ontology objects in Foundry. And Foundry, though, can be used to model it. You could be in Pipeline Builder working off of a Snowflake virtual table, output a virtual table from your pipeline. And so all of your compute for data processing is actually running in Snowflake and all of your storage for data is happening in Snowflake It's just Foundry is being used as the modeling layer to kind of like use things like Pipeline Builder to assemble and model those things, which is a huge value unlock, by the way. Like Palantir missing the data warehouse market was the single biggest strategic blunder they ever made, because it's the hardest thing that I've had to deal with when I go in to try and sell it and try and position it for customers. Like, well, we already have a data lake. We already have a data warehouse. We're already there, you know, like where does this thing fit in my stack? And it is very hard to convince people, oh, well, now you need to duplicate that data, or now you need to like run that through this other compute engine that costs a little bit more than this one, you know. Virtual tables unlock.
It would have been easier if Palantir was the data warehouse, because then they could just sell all the existing ideas.
Right. Well, you don't have to deal with that argument, right? If it was the data warehouse, there's no argument about like, how does this fit in with my data warehouse? It's like the fact that you had all these other tools sitting there, like Snowflake and like Databricks and you know, like BigQuery and Redshift. The fact that those things were already there meant like, oh, you have to find where Palantir fits in this thing, right? Right. I don't think that's the right argument to make. I think that I would rather have something that's holistic and full stack across like each part of the application stack. But like, that's kind of where things devolve. And so now with you know, being able to push down the compute to the data storage engines, like that is just, I mean, all those arguments go away and everyone's like, oh, I get it now. Oh my God, let's go build, you know, let's go build our ontology. Let's go build our digital twin. Let's engage the citizen engineers and unlock value and network effects like that. Thank God they did that, because it's like going to make the whole sales process, I think, way faster. You'll see the cycle reduce because there'll be way less pushback from IT over, you know, the positioning of it and strategically, like, where does it fit in the whole IT plan and technology plan. So yeah, that
Chad said this is similar to MMDP.
I'm not sure what MMDP, it might be the acronym for what they're calling this, because again, it's in like a private beta. I haven't got my hands on it. Chad was telling me about it.
Okay, so that he's probably referencing the thing you're talking about. Okay, so then here's the next question. Palantir is, from a market cap perspective, more valuable than Snowflake, but they missed out on those 7 years of creating a data warehouse. Was that the right decision to focus on the thing that mattered? Because
100%. I mean, how valuable is a data warehouse? How many of them are there?
Right.
In my opinion, way too many. So like, and we've known what's made a good columnar database for 15 years. I don't think there's been a ton of innovation. I mean, Snowflake maybe has a little bit more interesting of a compute model where they have a differentiation in their share nothing and share everything layers. But like, and it was, you know, it wasn't the first to be cloud native, but like it was one of the earlier ones, I think, that people kind of fell in love with. But like, again, that's large. I mean, that a columnar database and a data warehouse is a 100% commodity application. And you're seeing it now as more and more people are like, look at how often people are searching, how do I reduce my Snowflake spend? Like if that thing was not a commodity and was fully differentiated, it should be the opposite. You know, like, it should be, how do I reduce it? It should be like, how do I freaking expand it? You know, because it should be delivering. And so, yeah, I think it was 100% the right decision. However, it really made the sales process a lot harder, and it did slow, I think, the initial adoption rates. But I don't know if that really affected their strategy, because Palantir's strategy to date has not been to like saturate and go push down market into SMBs and try and fully saturate the space, which you kind of have to do if you're a commodity player and you're selling just like one brick in the stack and it's like slightly better than this other brick over here. Like, yeah, you kind of do have to push down market. I think that it was, at the end of the day, it probably didn't affect their strategy that much, but I do think it would have made adoption like 1,000 times easier the last 2 years if it had been there as a player in the warehouse space. And it might have made the incremental gains that we could see now in revenue and growth much faster, even among the cohort of customers that already exist. Like, you might see a much higher net dollar retention figure, for example, than you would see today. And we might actually see much higher revenue because you would have been adopted earlier. And then now you're getting a maturing user base who would know how to do a lot of these things I'm talking about doing, right? So we're kind of delayed a little bit, I think, of the adoption curve, but we're still going to wind up in the same place, right? At the end of the day, it's like where we're headed is like replacement, being like basically the operating system of enterprise, right? That's
nothing stops this train.
No, nothing's stopping that. I know where we end up. There may be some bumps in the road, you know, things may go haywire or sideways or whatever. But, over the long haul, I don't see how you would not want to have this be the new normal for building your enterprise apps. We do got to build the ecosystem around that. And I think that's why DevCon is so important. Is like, we've got to engage developers where they are. We got to bring them into the fold so that they can work with people like that guy, Matt from Palantir, who was on my team, right? Like, getting 2 days of exposure to Matt for an engineer who's just learning Foundry is like, full growth formula for that person. It's just like, they're going to grow more in those 48 hours working with someone like that, and then take that knowledge back to their enterprise. And then that just spreads, right? It's like you're infecting all these devs with way more knowledge, and knowledge they can't really get anywhere else. Like,
right.
One of the downsides of Foundry is the documentation isn't great. So like, if you can just cut through all that noise by like pairing them up with an engineer for 2 days, like, oh my God, they're gonna go back to their org with like way more knowledge and capability than when they left. So like, I think we need to do more of those. I think it's kind of like, oh, let's go city by city, all the majors. Let's hit those markets. Let's do like a 2 or 3 day event.
You think they should have like a little tour of DevCon? New
Hell
York,
yeah.
LA,
Hell
Texas.
Yeah. Again, because well, how else do you get over this problem of like, well, the documentation's not that great. The troubleshooting isn't the best because I don't have access to the logs. If I can get a concentrated 2 or 3 day event for that person in my organization, I'm sending everyone I can there, because they're going to walk out of there with knowledge you can't get anywhere else, right? So like, you now have alpha because your dev just got access to information and an experience that no one else in the market actually is going to get, except for a handful of other people. But B, it's like, again, they become champions. They go back to your org and they can effectively champion Foundry among the other developers and show them what they've learned, right? And now you're actually like moving and making forward progress, and as soon as developers kind of get that sort of initial stoke from like working on the platform, where they're like, holy shit, I didn't know it could do that, they're hooked. It's like, they're never going back. I've seen this happen multiple times when the developer.
I was just going to ask, do you have friends that experience Palantir and then they
yeah, totally. Like, and I've been like, it's a lot of them I've been working on for years. I'm like, you've got to try this thing. You got to try this thing. And then they come back to me like, holy shit, I get it now. Like, I get what you've been talking about for 2 years. And it is a lot of it of just working hands on. And then it finally clicks. They're like, holy shit, I just did something in an hour that I would have spent 3 weeks, and I couldn't have even done it all. I would have had to engage like a data engineer or someone to come in and help me solve this other part of the stack problem. So yeah, like, it's absolutely going to just infect developers' minds. And once they like get that initial stoke, they're never going back to building shit the old way. And so, yeah, like, and they have no idea what's coming either. Because like, for example, like at DevCon, I got to try the new website hosting feature for the OSDK, which is like, you can just launch and host React apps right in the OSDK, which is like Vercel. Like, if you're a developer out there and you use Vercel, it's one of the more popular platforms for building and delivering React apps. Now that you get just everything in Vercel is in Foundry, and it's even better because all of the shit that's in Vercel is built. It's actually on ontology components, right? So like Vercel's RDS system and Redis hosting, etc. Like, Foundry just provides all of that through the ontology layer, and it has way more capabilities. Like, Foundry has way more advanced geospatial and time series capabilities. They just released a whole bunch of new features for the ontology as well. And like, and then it's all literally like from your OSDK. The fact that it's built into the OSDK is great, because what it's doing is it's automatically sandboxing the security context around that application on your behalf. So like, a huge amount of work that goes into Vercel is securing the fucking Vercel application, right? So that like, the users have to log into your app are properly authenticated. You're making sure they can only access the data they're allowed to see. Guess what? I click a button in the OSDK. It's all done for me. Done. My app is secure. Like, I don't have to do anything else, dude. They're all logging in through Foundry. It's integrated with the OAuth workflow directly. If you log in and you're in Foundry and your groups are assigned, all the permissions just work across the entire ontology with AIP. Like, good luck building that on you're going to spend forever trying to build something like that on your own. So it's, to me, it's like the once people, React developers especially, that's the cohort of developers that I'm really focused on, is the React kind of developer. When they see this, they're going to freak out, because it's going to, like, to them, I think to a large part of the React community, it's like Vercel is kind of the only game in town. There's a few others for hosting apps, but really it's Vercel. And again, there's all these problems around permissioning and security and how do I integrate AI. To have this other alternative to use Foundry, I mean, you could just see an explosion of apps around the corner. I think the only thing kind of holding it back might be like, the access. So it's, a lot of this isn't available. It's still in beta. And B, it's like, what is that going to cost? Like, I haven't seen from Palantir yet, like they have the free tier, but like, what's the tier above the free tier? Like, is it $1,000 a month or is it $10 a month? Because that's going to make a material difference in how many developers adopt it.
Yeah, because Vercel is like $20 a month or something for basic web hosting.
I think it's like 30. I think it starts at 30 for pro, or maybe it is 20, but then it goes like rapidly up from there. Like, dude, there's horror stories on Vercel scaling, but it's nowhere near the cost of Foundry. Okay. So like Vercel, you're complaining because you're spending $500 a month. It's not that you're spending $50,000 a month.
Right.
So I think, but Palantir does have like reduced pricing tiers for builders and stuff, but there's nothing equivalent. There's nothing that's like pick from the menu, like here's the tiers.
Do you want Palantir to come out with that in 2025? Like, hey, 10, 50, 100, 3 tiers for builders per month, and really start a reoccurring SaaS business for people like me, people like small restaurants?
I mean, I think just one tier of usage-based pricing would work. I think, and there is a trend right now to get rid of tiers and just provide like a single usage share. There'll always be the enterprise layer because you need to negotiate caps in your spending, or like pre-negotiate what the spend will be so that it can go into a budget, and also provide access to like enterprise only features, which might be like you're not throttled on the compute at all, and maybe you have access to SSO or something.
Right.
But maybe the only tier they need is like just usage-based pricing, and let developers figure it out on their own, and try to make it as affordable as possible. Because if you look at the distribution of these apps, like the vast majority of apps that end up getting built are A, offered for free, and B, have like a handful of users. They almost always are going to fail, and they're going to have a very small usage base. But you need, like, the more apps get created in your platform, they start generating, again, network effects, and people start to learn the platform more, which also increases more people to like come in and build on the platform. And you actually kind of need to cast a wide net in a lot of cases if you want to create this like massively scaled platform that everyone is using. And that is more outside the this is like startups building kind of B2B and B2C apps on it. So I think like if you can keep it cheap, knowing that the vast majority of developers aren't going to have like massively successful apps, but cash in on the ones that are, like, because there's only going to be a handful of those, right? It's like, 1 in 100,000 or 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 10,000 are going to be like the next Uber or Lyft or whatever. So like, if you cast a wide net, you also get to grow with the company. So like as they scale and as their usage increases, like you're going to grow with them. So I think, and then also the fact that like you have this unique wave of AI apps coming in, it makes sense to want to get as many of the builders who are going to build this next generation of software that's AI forward and AI first, that is going to displace the incumbents. It makes a lot of sense to try and get them on your platform, right? Like, I'd sure like to have the next Salesforce built on my platform and not this other one over here, and it's very few times in history we go through a great replatforming like this, where like we are going to rebuild and replatform. Like, that doesn't happen very often. So I think like if you really want to ride this wave and bring in the developers, I think part of it is like, how do you just get them in? And they're already doing it. It's like free basically to build on AIP, but it's really limited. How do you just give them like a really cheap, transparent pricing model? And then as they start to scale, they just go into the enterprise bin once they get to like a certain size. So yeah, I would love to see that. We'll see if they do it though. I don't know what the challenges are there. And I know that they do usage-based pricing, like that exists today. Right. You can see your usage report in the stack. It's just not monetized. So I don't think there's anything technically stopping them from that. It might be like a strategy thing,
Ori says, Amit, please ask Codestrap why Palantir's ETL tool is better than Informatica.
I don't know. I don't use Informatica. I would say that as an ETL tool, Foundry's definitely not the best in the world. Like, there's a lot of problems that are probably harder to deal with in Foundry when it comes to connecting to different systems. The troubleshooting part is always the part that I hate the most. But depending on where I'm working, like if I'm working with a data connector that I'm using in Foundry to load in my data, and that connector doesn't surface like enough troubleshooting information for me to know why a connection's failing or why I can't connect or whatever, like that can actually be pretty frustrating. So I'd say it's not the best ETL tool in the world. I would also say that like it doesn't need to be. Really, like when you think about ETL, the whole point of ETL is to like bring that data into, most of the time, into a data warehouse and then leverage it so that people can see reports across data silos. Like they want to see all of their data brought together from their ERP to their CRM and whatever, their HR systems, et cetera, because they want a more accurate picture of what's happening in the organization. That latter part of getting the more accurate picture of what's happening across the organization once the thing is in is way more valuable and way harder to build than whatever the ETL layer is doing, in my opinion. Now, I would say that Foundry has done a very good job of building a nice serverless Spark layer that's been around for years. That, like Databricks, for example, just released their serverless Spark kind of environment deal. That's been in Foundry forever, and it has a really advanced, really good job queuing system, in my opinion. And what's cool about it is you can also bring your own containers to that system. So if you don't want to work in Spark, the job queue doesn't care if you're working in Spark or not. You can actually bring your own. You want to do Rapids? Great. You can bring your own container and build in Rapids. It also has lightweight transforms if you want to work with polars, you want to work with whatever. Like there's basically anything that is being used in data engineering today is supported in Foundry. So I have a lot of options with sort of how the data gets processed. And I really appreciate the job queuing and sort of serverless way everything is done. I don't need to maintain container. Like those containers are ephemeral. They don't run forever. They only run, or they're spun up and run when your job is running. That helps keep like a lot of the costs down. They provide a lot of good reporting. Is it the best ETL tool on the market? I would say no, but like I don't care if it's the best ETL tool. I care if it's the one that gets me to the business value over here, which is like, how do I start making decisions across my systems of record and building workflows across my systems of record and all of my data sources? You may data engineer go, hey man, as an ETL tool, I give it a 5, I give this other one a 10. And I'm going to say, fuck that. We're going to build it all in Foundry because all the business value comes 10 miles down the road from where your work product sits.
Right.
And if I can get to that value 8 times faster at like a fraction of the cost, why do I care if you're happy with the ETL tool you're using? I don't care. You know, it's like, I think that way too often organizations getting stuck in these battles about arguing over like, is this brick better than this brick, this one over here? When they don't realize that like, it's not even the wall that's valuable, it's the fucking building, and we got to have electricity in it, and we got to be compliant with OSHA and like everything else. That, and only then do we actually get any value out of the thing. And so like, I think people get way too caught up in like arguing like, does this thing in Foundry work as good as this other thing over here? And if you like that tool, there's no reason you can't use it either. Like we bring in data products produced in other tools all the time. So like the vast majority of data products I bring in Foundry are produced in Snowflake. So like, it doesn't really matter. Like, it's not like you have to throw out your favorite ETL tool just because you have Foundry. I mean, shit, like I think Nate from Tyson gave a presentation at AIPCon where he's using DBT on top of Foundry, you know? So like it doesn't make any sense to like get into these, like this or this apple and this orange. It's like really kind of thinking about the problem wrong. I think if you're arguing that. And there's no reason you can't use your favorite ETL tool and still get all the benefits I'm talking about, because we can bring those data products coming out of that ETL tool into Foundry and then get all the benefits north of the ontology I was talking about before to build those workflow applications and start delivering that business value, leveraging your citizen engineers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So like, I really want people to get out of that mindset of thinking like, well, it's not better than this, so therefore we shouldn't use Foundry. Like if that's your mentality, like if you're saying because it's not the best ETL tool, you wouldn't adopt the platform, like that makes no sense.
Right.
Right.
Code, there was a discussion a few months ago, and this discussion got really popular on the All In podcast, which was SaaS will be commoditized with AI.
Yeah.
And you won't need a CRM anymore. You won't need a Foundry. Like, do you think that's a realistic thing in 10 years?
Fuck no. Just go work with AI long enough for more than 5 minutes, and you'll find that it's like, that's a really slow way to develop good product. I think at the end of the day, I think like AI comes in and gives you incremental gains over your existing code generation tools, over your existing automation tools. It can help orchestrate those things more effectively. Would I want it to write code for me? Fuck no. Like, I mean, I'll some code, like boilerplate, Tailwind and CSS and JSX. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of boilerplate crap that we largely power through generators today, which I would still prefer a code generator for. Like, if you haven't used a code generator, just think like you can make templates basically, and code generators work by like basically filling in the blanks in your templates and producing like some stub code that gives you a better jumping off point. Models are really good at working with those because one, they can orchestrate your generators in the right order, and they can also grab the parameters from like unstructured data, whether that's like a chat conversation or whether it's a a bunch of Slack messages, for example. And so like it can be a really powerful way to kind of automate and extend and improve your current automation systems. But every piece of code that I want to deploy, I still want it reviewed by a human. I want it largely written by a human. I don't want, I'd prefer that they write their own damn unit tests as well. Like I don't really see the quality of the code improving with AI. And what you guys got to understand is the cost of software bugs are fucking astronomical. Like the cost of a bug you catch in development versus the cost of when it's in production, it's orders of magnitude. You know, when you have to do a hot fix because your site's broken, there's already a cost that the business has incurred, and it's way harder to fix. And you got to do a fucking post-mortem on it. If you catch that same bug while you're developing, like, oh, it's a you just hit the keyboard, you know? So like the idea that AI is going to introduce less bugs in your software is just complete horseshit. Like there was even a study that just came out recently where they literally were showing that when Microsoft and Copilot were comparing the bug rates, they weren't talking about like runtime bugs. They were talking about readability bugs. Like who the fuck, what is a readability bug? Like, I don't even know what that is. What's readability bugs? I know functional bug, like does the program work or not? You know, like is it broken? And so what we're seeing is that like what I see, it just even in my own data, this confirms my daily usage. So I have a lived experience here, plus I have some data that's confirming my lived experience. AI is not capable of writing production code. You should never let it write production code. It's a really good force multiplier. It's like a really good accelerator in certain cases. It can do boilerplate for certain parts of your stack, I would say, but I wouldn't want it writing my code. Now, does that mean we can build with less people? Yeah, definitely. Like I think that we don't need team, especially if you're using Foundry, for example, to build these apps. So like, let's just say I have a better starting platform like Foundry, where I don't have to do infrastructure as code. I don't need platform engineering teams that have to write all this infrastructure as code to deploy my app and manage my app and everything else. Like I'm starting on Foundry. The only code I have to write is business, code for my business logic, code for my apps. Now that's just starting point number one. And then if I have AI on top of that can help me be more productive, like let's just say I'm very good at writing code generators and AI and API orchestrators to do system orchestration in Foundry, AI can be really useful as like a virtual assistant to help me do all that. So I don't have to like type everything. I can just literally type a message in the Slack channel, just like, hey, deploy this thing, do this thing, generate some stub code and put it here. Like that kind of speed up lets you go from, and the fact you're not doing any platform engineering, I think you could go from 250 people to 2, but I don't think it's AI alone. And I think AI is the far less important component. The more important component is you're not building on the hyperscalers anymore. You're building on a platform like Foundry, where your software engineers are really amplifying your citizen engineers, and you're not writing any infrastructure as code. Every line of code is business value code, and all the hard parts of GitOps and deployment is all managed on your behalf. Like that's the accelerator, and also the fact that like with Foundry, when you deploy an app, it runs in the customer's infrastructure, not yours, right? So it's like, I don't have to have this massive infrastructure set up with all the monitoring and all the ops teams and everyone who's got, security teams and all of that around it. It's literally like delegated to my customer. You're tossing the software artifacts to them. That's not to say you have no responsibility for security, but Foundry is like providing both the infrastructure and security that normally paying dozens, if not hundreds of engineers to do. So yeah, I think that's the thing that's going to bring the cost down. And I think that's where like people like Chamath might have a blind spot if they're thinking that the reason SaaS is going to get easier and cheaper is solely due to AI. Yeah, if you want a bunch of products with bugs that no one can ever figure out how to fix, and a bunch of, like programmers that don't know how to program anymore because you fired all your good ones, or I don't know what you did. But like, no, and I don't think you also throw out 30 years of software that's been created, or like, best practices and tooling that's been built to make your stack run efficiently. Like if you have really good test and automation suites, you want to bring those into the new age on some level, so you want to re-platform, but I think if you don't have a platform like Foundry, the marginal gain is, well, it's just going to be a marginal gain. It's, plus or minus 10%. That's not a rebuild of SaaS, and things could get worse if you do it wrong, So you got to have this platform that replaces the old way of deploying and managing these workloads, plus the AI kind of in there, And I think AI is way more valuable as an orchestrator as managing control flow, like those kind of things, and not as a thing that creates the software artifact, but a thing that orchestrates it, you know.
And when you're saying AI, you're essentially talking about agents, right? Because we keep hearing a lot about that more and more.
Yeah. I mean, it's co-pilots and agents. I think within the context of this question, it was like, I think more around co-pilots and like, how can they be so much, how can they help the developer write so much more code that you just really don't need anyone? Maybe there's some agentic workflows they're implying in there for like deploying certain parts of that or whatever. But I think at the end of the day, like, agents are much more attractive to me than co-pilots. Like co-pilots are, I mean, anyone who's ever used one will tell you like, not the greatest, you know. It's like, it's okay, whatever. I kind of put it up there with Clippy, and like I don't see that as a big value unlock. I think for me, again, AI is a great orchestrator. So what does that mean? Like, well, number one, like in software, like if we just go really low level, if I have an agent that works inside a software system, okay, so like let's imagine I wrote a to-do app. And a to-do app is just like you could create to-dos for yourself, right? Like, oh, I need to do this, and then I need to do this, and then I need to do this. But like, what if you could write a to-do app that was like, hey, every Monday through Friday, I do the following, you know, make sure to make a to-do for me every Monday through Friday that does this, unless it happens to be the third Monday of the month, or I'm just stressed out that day. And then I don't want to do those things. I want to do these things. Now you can actually build a software application that can leverage logic that is using an LLM or like a neural net behind the scenes to build something like that. That's fundamentally a different kind of to-do app. Anyone who's used a to-do app knows it's just like, well, you get your list item, you check it off if you're done or not, and like blah, 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 blah. Now imagine that same to-do app that knows how to dynamically create your to-dos based on your sort of preferences, can also look at other things that are going on in your life and just automatically mark them as done. You don't have to go back to the fucking to-do app. It will just automatically mark your to-do app as done if it sees a system state change that it thinks is reflective of that task and it should be done. Right now, this is stuff that I'm working on in Foundry, like with Slack integrations and email communication integrations, Teams integrations, where we're moving away from like having to have a project management app where every task is like strictly created and controlled by a human, to where these agents are coming and just doing all the work straight from the system of record, which the real system of record in your organization is chat and email. Like, I hate to break it to you, but that's where like everything actually happens, and in transcripts of meetings. And so like I'm moving everything closer to the source, the origination of the data, leveraging this ability for software applications to use neural nets to make decisions instead of strict control flow statements. And then we can build these kind of apps where like you don't even have to like build in the majority of use cases. You're just asking the model to reason about like its goals and what's currently going on, and then produce whatever it thinks should happen. And then you have the human review it. And that's actually unlocking huge value. Because if you think about to-do apps, like the biggest to-do app that I spend a lot of my time in are project management to-do apps with like Gantt charts and RAID logs and sprint burn down reports. And this exact thing I'm talking about is allowing us to just go straight from the system of record, which is all the unstructured data, and produce all of those artifacts automatically, with me never having to sit down to write another Jira task again or produce another Gantt chart timeline or whatever. The model's doing that shit automatically. Yeah, a human may have to tweak it or fix a couple things, but that's what we're like working on now. So I think when we talk about agents, one, you just got to think of like at a very low level, neural nets provide a new way for software to make decisions that isn't hard coded by a human. You can have this other kind of intelligence in there determining, do I go here or do I go here, or do I do X or do I do Y? So there's that part of it. Then there's the sort of agents proper that we talk about, which is like something is orchestrating a workflow on your behalf based on state changes that happen. So like an event happens, that triggers this agent to come in and do something, or maybe you're in Slack and you have a / command. It's like, book me a trip to wherever. And the agent could reason about like, okay, it sounds like you're saying Denver. Maybe I reply back in Slack, did you mean Denver? You know, you want to fly into this airport or this airport? And do you want to stay at this hotel or this hotel? And you reply, and that agent picks up where it left off and now finishes booking your trip. Right. That's also the kind of agentic software that I'm working on. And I'm doing that in Foundry, by the way. Like I have a whole solution for this in Foundry that we're using in production that can do that. It can take a workflow, it can pause it and save it to the ontology. A new event comes in, it can rehydrate that workflow from where it left off and continue doing the work. Okay. And like that kind of shit is like such massive value unlock.
I was going to say that seems very valuable.
Well, because you can span multiple systems of record and multiple transactions all in an orchestrator that's using a neural net to figure out what to do next. Right.
It's like, kind of the promise of Apple's AI. You know, you talk to Siri, book me a flight, and it'll do it, but we're not there yet. for Apple.
Exactly. But we are though. Like I'm literally building these things in Foundry, and their success rates are crazy. So like, I think that for that kind of value unlock, we have no idea how effective it's going to be. Like what I mean is, I kind of have an idea of how effective it's going to be, and it's going to be the kind of thing that beats inflation on the supply side because we're going to be so much cheaper at doing shit. Like when I think about a company like that I work at, how much time we could save taking these approaches, it's the cost of doing business just starts driving closer and closer to zero,
Right.
So like that, if every company operates this way in the future, we are going to beat inflation on the supply side. We'll actually meaningfully reboot the economy where things are going to be made and offered at prices that you would think was impossible because you don't need all that human machinery around the scheduling and the orchestration and the workflows and the reporting and all that stuff. So again, if you're talking 100x reduction in human hours to do the same amount of work, that is meaningfully going to impact the economy for sure. So like that's what I'm most bullish on.
So I think that transitions us into the last question. Thank you, 411 people being here today on a Sunday talking to Codestrap. Code made a video yesterday on YouTube that I watched, and I'm putting his link right here in the chat. Everyone, please go subscribe, where you talked about Palantir's TAM. And to your credit, 2 years ago, I believe May of 2022, when Palantir, I think, was under 20 billion, you said Palantir is going to be $100 billion company. And we are here at 150 billion. And so you just said there's going to be 100x improvements in regards to the global economy. Palantir's TAM, obviously the market is assuming is pretty large. What is your current interpretation of the total addressable market, and where do you think Palantir goes over the next decade?
I mean, I'm kind of with Amir in that we don't know. It's like really hard to quantify the TAM, but I kind of think of it along some main pillars. But like one is just like, what is that value of replatforming enterprise applications and software generally on a layer above the hyperscaler? Because like one, there's a big value unlock there. Ollie Godsey, CEO of Databricks, has talked about this a lot. He calls it super cloud, but the value unlock for the customer is like they can effectively use hyperscalers at that point as commodities. They're running kind of compute in an undifferentiated way, and that gives them a lot of savings and freedom to move around. And also that the hyperscalers aren't incentivized to build that themselves. There's no incentive for GCP to build a service that interoperates on AWS. Does not want to do. Now they've tried to do some of these things, but inevitably they end up locking you back in to the main hyperscaler, right? So like they don't have a lot of incentives to try and do this themselves. So what is the value for the world's software applications to now have a platform that lets you effectively interop on these hyperscalers and have redundant workloads? So it's not just that I can pick AWS or GCP or Azure, but like, what about the reality of actually being able to run those across clouds in a way that you don't have to ever program a line of code? It's like having an active deployment, multi-region active deployment, not only across one hyperscaler, but across all of them. Like, I don't know what the value of that TAM is. It sounds pretty big to me though. Like, it sounds like it's a pretty large TAM. It might be like 30% of all global computing or something, like who knows what that is. The other, because like you could effectively take a marginal cut off of what the hyperscaler would get for all of those workloads, right? So maybe you're tacking on plus 30% on top of what the hyperscaler charges because you get that flexibility or something, or like, I don't know. But like I think there is a way in which Palantir starts to tap into that revenue. The other is like this value of like the AI services layer, rebuilding software in an AI forward manner, plus the value, like I was talking about before, where you now have this, platform in which I don't have to like dedicate all of this infrastructure as code and et cetera, all these programming resources that aren't actually dedicated to the core application logic, they're dedicated to the operations and everything around that. Like, what's the value of that TAM, And what about all enterprise software generally, like the point solutions, the supply chain management, the inventory tracking and rebalancing, like all the CRM, like and that TAM's projected to be 800 billion by 2030, right? So like there's all these components we have to look at because it is such a big tectonic shift in the way we kind of build software. It's combining both AI and this new super cloud with the idea that like all of these enterprise apps get replatformed on top of them. I don't know what the value of that is. I also don't know if the value goes down compared to where it's at today, in the sense that like, does that pie grow, or does it actually shrink meaningfully? Because like, if let's just say Salesforce today costs me $100,000, but the new competitor's Salesforce costs $1,000, whatever it is, $10,000. Does the pie get bigger because now more people use Salesforce, or have we reached full saturation point? Or do we have to like reinvent Salesforce into something else, and that actually grows it, but at a cheaper per unit price? Because I would say that if AI does live up to the hype, the per unit economics are going to come down substantially, like factors of 10 down substantially. So that means usage would have to grow if the pie stays as big, or we're growing the economy, and so that therefore the usage is going to grow with it. So, but I would say that the unit economics on these things has to come down, and that's how people are going to compete too. Because like the number one way the companies who are rebuilding on Foundry, taking advantage of these new layers, are going to compete against the incumbents is on margin. They're going to come in and offer immediately out of the gate 30, 40, 50% cheaper product that's better, you know? And so like, again, that's why I say that the TAM's always hard to quantify. It's like, you don't know where it's going to be, but I definitely think it's going to be north of $1 trillion. Like,
I was going to say, do you think Palantir can be $1 trillion company now?
Well, I mean, they easily, like, if you make 200 billion in revenue, you're easily a multi-trillion-dollar company. I think if you make 100 billion in revenue, yeah, you can. I mean, what you just assume a 10x revenue multiplier, right?
Yeah.
So, and that would be low. If they're still growing double digits, it's probably gonna be closer to like a 15 or something on their revenue multiplier.
Right.
So, yeah, and it's a question to me. That's like the real question is, can they figure out how to grow the ecosystem around them fast enough to get there? Do we get there in 10 years? Do we get there in 5 years? You know, and if you grow the ecosystem relatively quickly, we can get there in a really short amount of time. I think we get there in 5 years, because what happens is like all of those partners who are now dedicated to build software offerings in the manner that I'm talking about, deployed on Foundry as the platform, essentially Foundry would have a monopoly on disruption across enterprise software. So like if let's just imagine 2 years from now, there's 150 to 200 ecosystem partners of Foundry, at least 100 of which are dedicated to building software that does nothing but run on Foundry. You know, like you now have like probably full disruption across the enterprise space of everything that's offered today, because again, it could be offered at a much lower unit economic price. It's rebuilt to be AI forward at the core and rethinks how we do all these use cases, right? Because of all the things I was explaining earlier about that to-do app, right? Like all these things that we think of like Jira are designed to be human-centric. They're human at the center. Even if you bolt on Clippy up in here in the corner, you didn't rewrite the core of your system to be AI forward. And these new products that are going to be built on Foundry that are leveraging AIP at the core to make decisions and logical control flows and decide what to do next, those things are going to be like 10 times better to use than these existing ones. So if like Palantir can grow that ecosystem to 200-300 partners over the next 5 years, maybe get 100 of them that are dedicated software houses that do nothing but rebuild SaaS, or Palantir decides to do a lot more of this. Maybe Palantir decides to invest in building dedicated teams internally that do nothing but go out and disrupt on this level by rebuilding all these point solutions across the enterprise. Hell, maybe there's even a consumer platform that comes in here at some point. You know, like Ted posted the other day, I think a whole bunch of consumer apps people have built to help them in their daily lives. I think there's like trip planners and remodel planning and like all this other stuff that people have been building. So who knows like where that goes, but I do think the growth in the ecosystem, the people using it, the partners, it's all super important if they want to keep costs low, or they're going to probably do something like investing in a lot of growth, building their own teams internally to like go out and build more solutions that compete directly against some of these people. Although I would say that is a little bit tougher of a proposition, because you don't want to be competing head to head against some of your partners too. So like if you're partners with some companies that now you're competitive with, that might get a little tricky. So that's also another reason why like having ecosystem partners doing this is kind of a way to maintain your independence and not be directly competing head to head as much with your other industry partners. But yeah, that's kind of the way I think about it.
Last question. I know you said in the weekly review last year that Palantir will have its NVIDIA quarter. The stock has kind of had an NVIDIA moment, but the quarter, we haven't had a crazy, 70% growth quarter. Do you think 2025, that quarter potentially happens?
I don't know. It's a good question.
And that quarter to me would be defined as minimum 40% growth, because 30% good software companies can do that. 40 to 45.
I thought we were going to see it by now, like for sure. I thought growth would have accelerated much quicker. I'm not sure what the bottleneck is. It could be we're still got to get over the initial price point and perception that it's expensive. That still seems to be the number one thing that kind of hurts adoption, is the cost. Like let's just say you're going in, you're going to adopt Foundry as your new customer. The price point's $1 million. It's like that almost shuts down the conversation right there. You know, I don't know what the price point is. Let's just say hypothetically it's $1 million. So maybe that's one of the things hurting growth, is that. The other might be that like there just isn't enough understanding of the product. Like you could still go into companies today aren't going to know what Palantir is. Like I promise you go walk into some company and they're, what's Palantir? Is it a clothing line? I heard it's a clothing line. They make sick t-shirts.
Eliano.
Yeah, exactly. So like, I don't know. I like I said, I thought we would have been here by now already. I would expect it to have seen like a 50-60% quarter this year by now. So maybe I'm just like ahead of the curve because I'm seeing the success stories at like the places that I'm embedded at.
Right.
But like, yeah, I don't know. I think it really depends on if they find the right sort of price entry point to do make the new logo acquisition scale, and then really ramp net dollar retention. Because like it is easier to like expand usage among a cohort of customers you already have, especially if the value being delivered is just compounding, right? So like, if you go from delivering 10 million to 20 million to 50 million to 100 million to 200 million, like a Tyson kind of thing, it makes it a lot more palatable to be spending, 2x what you were last year. So like, and you can do that quickly, right? Like I said, the value compounds. So like once you have a foundational ontology built, the number of use cases you can build on top of it start to really grow and snowball. So like that net dollar retention rate could also be the thing that unlocks way more growth. But honestly, if I'm really thinking honestly about it, it's like I think the thing that's going to give you the quarter that we're talking about, the crazy 50, 60, 70% quarter is going to be they crack this new logo acquisition problem. Like, how do we go out and like,
which would be more
the
boot
barriers,
camps, right? Like hiring more people for boot camps?
I don't know, to be honest. I think boot camps appeal to a certain prototype and cohort of customers. They don't appeal to every customer. And like, I've been at a lot of these boot camps, like for every person that's super bullish and stoked, there's also the guy on the fence who's like, I don't know, doesn't look as good as this tool for this thing, So like, I think that there's a way in which we got to expand the tent and bring more people into the tent. I think part of that is education. Part of it might be boot camps. I think another part of it is just competing on margin. Like, there has to be a way to offer things cheaper and get people in the door more effectively, and maybe that's that pure usage-based pricing I was talking about earlier, where you don't need a minimum commit on spend, and like you can really get in there and just start using it, and skip maybe your first year spending 50,000, the next year spending 100,000. I don't know what it is, but like that new logo acquisition, I think has to we got to unlock it somehow, and I think a big part of it is just the price point perception, and the other part is education.
Right.
How many people know it? What's the pool of hiring? Can I hire around it? Like if you're going to adopt a platform in your organization, I think the hiring pool is something you think about, right? Like, or the talent pool is something you think about, because you're like, well, either Palantir is going to have to build all my software, or I've got to find a way to hire people who are experts in this and partners that know it. So a big part of delivering that 50, 60, 70% growth quarter is probably going to be heavily correlated with developer adoption, increased training and education, reduction in the cost. I think a lot of those things all have to kind of happen, because like I said, I thought we would have been there already, and I think what's hindering it is that new logo acquisition and being able to kind of break through some of these barriers of like, oh, it's expensive, or no one knows, it's a black box, no one knows it, whatever. I don't know. So yeah, but if I had to put money on it, I would say like, yeah, I would almost put money on it next quarter. Like, I don't know. I've been wrong all year, so like I feel really bad about that. I thought for sure we'd see way more accelerated growth. So yeah.
All right. There we go, folks. Codestrap is a gem in this community. He's been here since the very, very early days. There's his Twitter right there. Please make sure everyone to go follow him. And I guess really last question for you, Code. How does it feel just being on this journey, kind of predicting this to happen, and it, I guess, blew your expectations as well?
Yeah, man. It's been a crazy journey. Like, it's funny because like I started out just talking about it on my YouTube channel, ended up being the first person outside of Palantir or customer to get access to Foundry, right? It's kind of like when they initially started the developer community, and then like as I learned it, I decided to quit my job and go all in on rolling this thing out at large institutions. Yeah, and like so, and then stock success coming this year is just insane. It's just like, what? Like I thought, I mean, I know where this thing ends up, but I didn't think we'd be here this early in the game. You know, like my God.
Right.
So it's been an amazing journey, and I just like say thanks to everyone at Palantir. I've had a lot of supporters at Palantir through this whole thing, trying to essentially make sure that I had the right information, that I had access to the right people in the company, help get me over like hurdles. They've also been really good at supporting me in like strategic discussions about like where I'm at now, like trying to position, a lot of different people around this thing. So it's been awesome. And they've given me a ton of support along with like people in the community, like you and the crew, that have been awesome. So yeah, I think it's been like this crazy 2-3 year kind of journey. And we're just getting started, dude. Like this is just we're on the runway, man. Like we haven't even taken off of the carrier yet.
That's what you told me at AIPCon.
Yeah,
it's like we are just getting started on where this
big time. Like, and again, like I think that, like I was telling you at AIPCon, I think there are $100 billion on the defense side alone, and we're starting to see that the reasons why. If you can get software that works inside the government, oh my God, like that's a huge value unlock we've never really seen before. And then as far as on the commercial side, oh my God, that's going to be a whole nother discussion. So yeah, like I said, we're still on the carrier. We haven't taken off yet. It's been a hell of a journey though, and I'm looking forward to the next 5 years. I think it's going to be pretty nuts.
I love it. Thank you, Codestrap. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We will see you guys probably in 2 weeks. Code will join us on Palantir Weekly Friday night.
It's on year in review, man. Year in review. We're gonna get the ugly sweaters out. I'll get a nice glass of bourbon.
I'll get some.
Will you actually have a drink on
yes,
the live broadcast?
I want to get some spiked eggnog. Let's do that.
Okay. Okay.
Is that good? Have you had spiked eggnog before?
Oh, every year. Yeah, I make it every year, dude. Super good.
Okay, I will. I'll bring it.
You don't want to drink too much of it though. It's like
no, I should be drinking more of it during the show. Let's see what happens.
Yeah,
let's see what
see.
I say.
We'll see. All right, man. Awesome.
All right, guys.
Thanks for having me on.
We'll have that episode. Yeah. Thank you, Coach.
Everyone. Cheers.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.